This is a crusade. This is a holy war against the deep state.
Where are the dictators? Where are the strong men?
Donald Trump is our instrument for retribution.
I'm going to fight for Christians. I'm going to fight for white people.
They have the Great Reset. We have the Great Awakening.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia? Because I am.
I want to see these people go through misery because of their grooming against our children.
After the assailant entered the home asking, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Those are the very same words used by the mob when they stormed the United States Capitol.
I did nothing wrong.
Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff and with me today is the founder of the Glitterpill Community, Samantha Kutner. Samantha, how are you today?
Good, all things considering.
Yeah. So speaking of the all things that we're considering here, before we get started, I want to say a few words about the Charlie Kirk assassination. First off, we're recording this on the morning of Thursday, September 11th, 2025. And there's a lot we don't know. So we're going to do our best not to make any judgments about who may have done what, because almost nothing is confirmed about the assassin or their motives. And I'm sure there will be plenty of commentary in the future on that, but right now we simply don't know. So we're going to refrain from any unhelpful speculation. And we suggest that everybody who's got a platform, be it a social media account or a podcast, think about doing the same. And as we have always said on this show, political violence is not the answer and must be condemned. Full stop. We've been very consistent about this because we actually believe it. The world where the assassination of political pundits and influencers is normalized is not a world anyone wants to live in. And if you disagree, you're wrong. So let's let cooler heads prevail on this. It is okay to criticize somebody's actions, somebody's beliefs, somebody's take on everything without wanting them dead. And while we have mightily criticized Charlie Kirk for his actions and his beliefs, we didn't ever wish death on him or anyone else that we have covered, because that's not who we are. That's not the country we want to live in. That's not what we do. So if that's where you're at, if you think that this is something we should be making fun of right now, or if this is something that you want to go outside and post on Blue Sky or Twitter or Facebook or wherever you're posting these things and say, yeah, Charlie got what he deserved. No, I don't think so. I disagree with that quite emphatically, because I don't think anybody deserves to get killed for exercising their free speech. And at the end of the day, I don't agree with anything Charlie Kirk had to say about anything for the most part, but that's what happened. And that's wrong. That should not have happened. So we're going to try and not speculate on who might have done any of this, because there's simply no point. They're going to come up with it. We'll have plenty of time to analyze motives later. But right now, what we need to do is turn down the temperature and take a big step back from this, because there's a lot of people who would like the temperature to be significantly higher than it is. And if you've been on social media in the last 24 hours, you've seen that. There's people who are out there posting all kinds of, yeah, this is great, let's go get this next person. And then there's people who are posting, look at the things that the left is saying about Charlie Kirk. It means war. Let's go out and have a war. And if this isn't where you want things to go, then you on either side need to do your part and not speculate unhelpfully or be gleeful about it when another person got killed. Because political violence is not the answer to any question we should be asking. It just isn't. So it's been a rather intense 24 hours as a result of this. We originally planned to do this episode, and we were mainly going to talk about self-care. And we were going to talk about the idea of how do you deal with being in this information environment where things are just hitting you all the time? How do you deal with the constant fire hose of not just content, but like things that you have to be essentially aware of that are going on? How do you keep your head in one place when all this is happening. And one of the things that actually made a lot of things worse yesterday is that the assassination was filmed. There is video of the Charlie Kirk assassination, several angles of video from the Charlie Kirk assassination. And as a result of that, we ended up getting quite a few social media posts from one place or another where people actually got to watch Charlie Kirk get assassinated in real time. And that has an effect on people. That has an effect on anybody who happens to watch it. There's a reason why they don't recommend you watch gore videos. And that's essentially what this turned into, was a gore video of Charlie Kirk. And it's been a really rough couple of, 24 hours or so processing this entire thing. I know that you happened to run across it as well in your research, keeping up on this stuff. What possesses people to put this kind of stuff out there again and again for people to stumble over? No content warnings, nothing like that, just autoplay videos. Next thing you know, you're watching a guy get killed.
Well, have you seen the movie Smile?
I don't know that I have.
So, terrifying premise that touches on emotional contagion. This, it starts with this someone going to, see, I forget the exact thing, someone going to see a friend, whatever it might be. And then the character, right before committing this deadly act of murder, has this, huge demonic smile on their face. And the horror and trauma of that gets passed to them. But it's done in the frame of kind of like The Ring, where you have this many days to get through that. And then like the sequel to Smile, sorry for the spoilers, was how do I spread this as much as possible, doing it at a live concert where everyone's just there is this this thing that grabs hold of you when you're seeing something that is another human being getting murdered that doesn't feel real, and there's shock, and after shock there's like this if you felt it in your chest, or this energy of like I need to do something about this. I need whatever it might be, right? And I need to inform people. And then in that I need to inform people hyper aroused state, he was this. No, he was this. No, he was this. Oh, he was there. And then he was actually arrested. Now not arrested. Now he was this person. Now he was this political outgroup that we don't believe. And in this chaos, disinformation and conspiracy theories, you create this environment that sustains itself by constantly getting into that response where logical reasoning gets thrown out of the window, and hyperpolarization and tribalization continues. And we're already at the level we're there.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Absolutely familiar. And, we're also aware of the idea that there are people out there that have as their goal watching the whole thing crash down. And by whole thing, we mean society. And one of their biggest tactics is finding divisions in society and jamming a wedge in between them as hard as possible. We saw this a lot with, the George Floyd protests. We saw this a lot after, 10/7. We saw this a lot all the way through Trump's first term and most of his second. Sometimes we think of these people as accelerationists. And, real short definition of accelerationist is somebody who wants to accelerate the collapse of society so they can start over. They're convinced that the world is fallen and not worth saving. And as a result, we need to burn it all down and build something better out of the ashes. And it's absolutely terrifying to see how an event like this gets used by groups and people like that. And I think we're already seeing a lot of it on that. It's very, how do I put it? There's a utility that these people have gotten out of this murder that has turned into a real terrifying place to be in society in 2025, because things are already very tense. And now they're going to take this murder that almost everybody who follows politics or who pays any attention to, cultural life in America has an opinion on. And they're going to blow this thing up so big that everybody's going to have to take a side.
Yeah.
And those sides are going to be fighting with each other.
6 years ago, when Charlie Kirk came to my campus, I got to apply the best from my field in real time, and it did de-escalate violence, produced meaningful dialogue, and help people understand that when you're in, again, that hyper-aroused state, especially when people are trying to trigger you into a response, you're not thinking rationally. And when you're not thinking rationally, you might engage in ways that are incredibly good content for people who are looking to further mobilize people to the cause. And so when I got hired right out of grad school to help with a smaller initiative, at first was like, okay, when you're dealing with controversial speakers on campus, yes, Charlie Kirk was the thing that set it off, but it wasn't just about Charlie Kirk. It was, how do you understand tactics to be more effective in communicating your perspective? That's not going to convince Charlie Kirk or anyone around that, but possibly people in the audience who are trying to understand things in a more nuanced way, right? So I helped educate. It was a training for staff to explain some of the tactics that were being used. And then I had a brilliant crisis communications professor named Todd Phelps, who recently passed away very suddenly. And he understood what I was trying to do, because I was in his class when journalists first started reaching out to me. And I'm like, hey, I joined your class with a very specific purpose. How do I do this? Like, how do I navigate these situations in a way that doesn't feed into narratives that increase the likelihood of extremism? Right?
Yes.
And he, bless him, he really helped me understand a crisis communications approach. So before the event, we created a 3-minute video about things that you should know. And then we ended with the idea that, what I wanted people to understand was when you can reduce your emotional reactivity, you can prevent instances of further recruitment to violent extremism in any ideology. When you have enough sense within yourself to recognize that you're being pulled in a specific way, you can also recognize that you have the opportunity to pivot. And that level of control and that level of self-understanding is so fundamentally absent that I don't think I want to even dedicate myself to countering violent extremism anymore as much as promoting resilience on that level, because it can change the world. It really can.
That's an interesting shift. The idea that maybe we're attacking this idea at the wrong point. Maybe countering violent extremism is something that we need to rethink. We need to rethink what that actually means and what would be a more successful model for making this work. Because I'm not sure the current model is actually working at all, looking at what's going on.
Yeah.
You get some individuals, but on a societal level, things have not gotten less violent and extreme in the last 10 years. In fact, things are so radically much farther along the line that we're now having people talking about an American years of lead. And for those of you who aren't aware, that was a period of time in Italy where political violence was completely normalized. And nobody really wants to live in this environment, especially not in a country where, I did the math on Italy. The highest percentage of gun ownership, as far as anybody can tell in Italy, they don't keep great stats on this, but it looks like it was about 15% of the population during that time may have had a gun. America has 1.5 guns for every person who live here. So I don't know that I'd want to do a situation where political violence is normalized in a country that is as awash in weapons as the United States is in 2025. This just seems like it's got the potential to get very violent and extreme before we go much longer on this. So I find myself thinking that maybe it's a really good idea, instead of doing some of what we've been doing, to talk about, what you were talking about, to talk about resilience, to talk about the idea of like turning down the rhetoric. We've been talking about culture war for quite some time. And as a result, things have gotten more violent because we talk about war all the time. And I'm not saying it's a direct correlation, but you definitely get more of what you focus on. You get more of the behavior you reward. And when the people who talk about violence and culture war in those terms end up with, massive social media platforms and lots of sponsors, you find yourself thinking, well, that's why. You've made it financially beneficial for these people to talk in these terms. And of course, they're going to do it at that point. And you're going to end up with an actual hot culture war. And that, I think, has to be sort of all of our priority right now, is figuring out how to turn that volume down, turn that temperature down.
And I didn't think I would cry over someone that I fundamentally disagreed with. But I did.
Yeah.
I did cry over Charlie Kirk. I cried over him today. Like, it's not just him that was taken out. It really feels like this will be the new norm without any intervention. And people are celebrating in really sadistic ways. When Heather Heyer was murdered in Charlottesville,
Right.
I was told that neo-Nazis replayed the footage of her over and over again to celebrate that, and I found that just as sadistic and cruel as when people...
I don't want to watch... I watched the Kirk video, one of the Kirk videos, because there's several. I watched one. I'm never going to watch it again. I didn't need to see it in the first place, but I saw it. And I highly recommend you turn off all of your autoplay settings on any social media you're on, because you're probably going to get smacked with this one. Yeah. At least if you're in these kinds of spaces over the next few days and you don't want to see it. If you haven't, you just don't.
Yeah.
You don't need to watch this. And that's one of the things that people use to turn up the temperature. I mean, we talked earlier about the idea of there being people whose goal it is to accelerate the collapse of society, of Western civilization. And one of the things they're really big on is gore videos, showing videos of people getting hurt or killed or anything to desensitize people. And we've just had a high-profile political assassination in this country. And somehow almost everybody on social media has actually seen the video of it happening. This isn't like, the Zapruder film from a very far distance where you can sort of see something happening. This is very graphic. Somebody was very close to this when it happened. So getting people to watch this kind of stuff over and over definitely desensitizes them to this and makes them less, sensitive to the idea that maybe we shouldn't do some of this kind of thing. It normalizes it. And I really think that that's something we got to take into account, is that the more people celebrate this, the more people put that video out there, the more it's going to become a thing that people don't worry about, and that people think, oh, this is the new normal. This is what happens to our political opponents now. And like I said at the top of the program, if we normalize the idea that killing our opponents is the way to go here, we're not in America anymore. We're in a completely different place. And I don't think that's a place any of us really want to go.
I do think people's concept of humanitarianism and empathy has been fundamentally distorted also as a function of being exposed to graphic violence. After October 7th, we were also subjected to seeing videos of people being raped, murdered, evidence of rape. We were also exposed to the graphic images of Palestinians, and you can't, if you have any concept of humanity left, and you it is fundamentally disturbing, and it always comes with the sense of urgency that something must be done. And people who know how to radicalize and recruit people know how to capitalize on those moments. So the morality of seeing death and destruction on this massive scale, it has really been such a disservice to Jews and Muslims around the world. I mean, two weeks after October 7th, maybe less than 2 weeks, I spoke at the United Nations, and I warned about genocidal rhetoric that was getting Jews and Muslims killed. And I can't believe we're here. I can't believe that things have gotten so distorted in the perception of war. I cannot believe that there are students in America who are championing the oncoming of things they don't even understand.
Yeah. And I understand that you can't see video, you can't see pictures and not be affected to some extent if you're still a human. You see what's going on and you think, we've got to do something to help. And this is almost, in a lot of ways, a reflexive control, where they show you the information that they want you to see and basically lead you to a decision. And one thing I think we saw, especially in the aftermath of 10/7, was two sides doing this as hard as they could on both sides. You had both sides in that conflict fighting a propaganda war on top of the actual battlefield war. And I think that's the first time a lot of people here had seen that. The idea that there were two very conflicting narratives that were competing for their attention. And maybe you see this a little differently, but in the progressive side of things, I would definitely say that the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli, in some cases, completely anti-Semitic narrative ended up winning to some extent, especially with the younger folks. And that's just a real bad road to end up going down to a large extent. There's more than enough room for multiple bad guys in most situations. And I mean, a lot of what the IDF did was completely wrong and inexcusable. And a lot of what the Hamas leadership living in Qatar asked their people to do on the ground in Gaza was also completely unacceptable and awful. So you can definitely have multiple sides doing terrible things to try and win a conflict. And I think that's what we saw to a large extent. And like you said, people can be emotionally reactive. And when they jump on something like that they see, it's very hard to change their mind or convince them that, hey, maybe you reacted or jumped when you shouldn't have jumped. Maybe you haven't quite figured out, anything that's really going on here, but you saw a video and it's really upsetting. And now all of a sudden you're on this whole side. So really, I think you're right. What it comes down to is we've got to figure out how to turn the temperature down as a society, how to not go here anymore. But it's almost like there's been a huge push, really ever since social media blew up in the first place, but ever since 2016, more specifically, to keep people in this hyper-aware state of always being up on the conflict, always being ready to, defend whatever your chosen side is here, always being ready for a battle. And I think that we're living in the results of that, where we saw clip after clip. I mean, the day before Charlie was killed, there was a young Ukrainian woman killed, and it blew up and it turned into everybody's seen it, everybody wants to do something about it. But it's like every single day we're faced with something like this, it feels like. And what you're saying about turning down the temperature has to happen, because this is just not a sustainable way to live.
No, it's not. And I was talking to Elsa on the last episode of the Glitterpill podcast about how we actually don't have the capacity mentally to see the world on this scale and be aware of all the evil in the world every single day. Like there's really so much you can process. And I tell extremism researchers all the time, you get into a space to process what you're going through, and it almost instantly becomes an intel sharing space. And then it's almost like a group self-harm space because you're constantly sharing this stuff without really, engaging in any other aspects of like who you are, which, it's fine. If it's an intel sharing space, it's an intel sharing space, right? But there has to be a balance. You have to understand, whatever your vision of the world is, you have to take care of yourself and force yourself to do the things that you need to do that you know are good for you, especially when you don't want to do them. And in the moments that people become hyper aware, hypercharged, and they want to do something, it's usually the moment where they should at least take a step back and reappraise things before they move into the doing something. And that's not to say that inaction is what you should be doing. It's not that. It's being more strategic about what you can do in the moment without succumbing to the moment, or, having a thought without becoming the thought, or recognizing like, I've been here sitting in this position, consuming this content or these terrible things for hours. And I know this is not good for myself, and I need to touch some fucking grass.
Yeah. And it's really necessary when you find yourself having those thoughts and you go outside, and it's almost like coming out of a dark movie theater where you find yourself just saying, whoa, this is what the world looks like today? Wow, it's crazy. I thought it was this. And, I've had that happen to me where, like, I've been doing some kind of show prep or work or something, and finally I'm like, I need to go outside. I need to go do something else for a minute. Go, take a walk, or, go run around the block or something. And you go outside and you're like, wow, it was so much worse in there than I thought it was. My head was in such a bad place. And I think that, like, people need to be aware that this is the state that not just certain tech companies, but certain political actors would like to keep you in all the time. And when you are in that state, it is very easy to convince you of any number of things about the world. And as a result, I think that this is something that they definitely encourage over there. They definitely want you to feel like the world is always ending, and you need to not only doom scroll all the time so you don't miss it, but you also need to take care of, like, personal safety because you're not safe. You should go out and find some way to, make yourself more safe. And that usually involves spending money on things that you probably just don't want to spend money on. But it's been a very terrifying 24 hours. And I don't think that we're out of the woods at all on this. I think things are about to get a lot worse. And I think that things are about to get a lot worse for almost everybody in this country as a result of this, besides the people that find this kind of thing very useful to their project and to their goals. So let's talk about this, because I know we've talked about Glitterpill before, but it's been a minute, and, it's not bad to have a refresher here. You do an intentional community called Glitterpill, and you've been doing this for a while. You provide kind of a space for people who not only are in this field, but for people who are interested in this kind of stuff. And I want you to sort of talk about it a little bit. Explain exactly what it is you do and why.
You can only look at the worst of humanity for so long before you want to do what's within your power to make the world a better place. I know a lot of Jewish people across spaces have this concept of tikkun olam, of doing what you can to make the world a better place, of repairing the world, they call it. And for me, I have seen so much in this space, and this was not my like original career path that I had in mind. I didn't set out to do this work. I actually was interested in promoting psychological flexibility and helping people enhance the quality of their life. And so I have, over many, many years and several not so great coaches, that I've found practices and tools that I've tested on myself first, kind of focus tested in the public, or not public because it is a private Facebook group, in the Glitterpill community. And it is a space where if the only thing you do is show up and be like, I'm not okay right now, this is not normal, you have other people that get that. Like you're not, no one's trying to ask anyone for intel or anything like that. It's just I recognize that, you know, the spaces that we find ourselves in do not emphasize the community. You know, like there are tons of resources and psychoeducational content that is wonderful, right? But it doesn't become alive and vibrant until you work through those things in community. You can't necessarily do that in isolation. It's why a lot of the DIY stuff tends to fail. And it's also a way that I found extremism researchers have found a really sneaky way to numb from, by just over ingesting information. So, you know, during the pandemic, we were having weekly self-care chats using somatic practices that are recognized to be useful with veterans suffering from PTSD and other things that involve, you know, tapping. I don't know if you've heard of EFT tapping, but we were doing, you know, tapping, meditation, things that were, you know, it was more like a peer group. You know, I have a degree in psychology. I am not a psychologist. I have been useful in helping facilitate disengagement with extremists over the years, but I also think that, you know, it's ultimately everyone's choice to move away from that. And I do believe in human flourishing, and I think it starts with, you know, for anyone doing research in disinformation or extremism or getting involved in activism, you have to get right with yourself first. And I mean that on a soul level. Like, you will continue to create problems in the spaces that you inhabit or help organize if you don't take time to reflect on the things that brought you to this point, perhaps underlying trauma that you maybe never sufficiently processed. Because, you know, the easiest way to try to solve the world's problems, the easiest way to run away from your problems is to try to solve everybody else's, right? And I have seen, I can't even begin to tell you how much I've seen, like, you name it, across industries in this very strange world we find ourselves in. And I'm still the most optimistic researcher out there. And it's because of the practices that I do. And I've learned over the years, you can't force anyone, especially if they're self-abandoning, to do the thing they need to do. Like, I do think the way that we consume information is almost a kind of self-harm sometimes that we probably don't acknowledge. And so I have a private Facebook group that people can join and engage in, subject to some vetting. And then I have a more intentional container that has the self-care practices where it's like, okay, you are committed, you will, you know, like, show up, you will join virtual meetings. And I've been rebuilding that. And that's really like where my heart and focus and passion is. And these are simple practices. Like, have you ever heard of 750 words?
No, I have not.
I mean, there are great tools out there. This is one of them I've been doing since like 2012. 2012. Can I do years at this point? Yeah. So this is one that I've been doing for over a very, very long time, over a decade. It starts with, instead, you know, when you wake up in the morning and you have that surge of adrenaline,
right?
Instead of going straight to your phone and having this Pavlovian response to your phone, you free write for the equivalent of 3 pages, or you could type it online. Handwriting is usually better, right? The goal of the exercise is to not self-censor, not try to correct your grammar, let everything that needs to bubble up to the surface. And you have these really powerful moments where you can kind of peer below this conscious level of awareness and see these deeper
Yeah.
insights and glimmers. And, in more clinical terms, is metacognition, or thinking about your own thinking. And if you were to do that practice even once a week to start, regardless of if you join the Glitterpill community or not, you would feel a notable difference and be able to catch yourself in those moments where you find yourself being pulled in a direction that you don't necessarily want to go in. And so I do hope people join, because I'm not coming from this being a business as much as just I do want to help people. I do still work for a living, and I have to, everything that I can do extra to make this work, I've been putting into. So if you do support, great. But I want people to do these exercises because I know they work. And I think that anyone that I've worked with, even the people who may respect my research but don't particularly like me because I am kind of controversial for just being fully myself.
You? No. Nothing controversial about you.
I want to give this to this broader community of people who are doing work that the world doesn't acknowledge the importance of yet, not on a level that it needs to be. Like you all deserve support too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is, like, the writing is a great tool for clarity. I mean, since I started doing this show, I have to write a lot. And I find that not only does it improve your writing, but it also improves your thinking. Anytime that you realize you're going to have to write something down and you're going to say it either on a microphone or, in front of a camera, or you're going to post it, you have this sort of sense of, wow, I better make sure this is really good, because somebody somewhere is going to be able to dig this up. You can never entirely get rid of something that you've said on the internet. If somebody wants to archive you, or if somebody wants to, take a screenshot of something you've said or a recording of something you've said, they're going to find it. We've done it enough times here that I have no doubt that if anybody really wanted to dig up something that I've said that wasn't good, they could go do it. So I find that writing, either in a structured way, like what you're talking about, or even just in a sense of like, I'm going to get up every day and write and see what happens, will focus your writing and your thinking and potentially make this kind of thing easier for you to get through. It won't kind of seem quite so big and overwhelming once you've sat down and actually collected your thoughts and been really honest, like you said, with no real self-censorship about how do I feel about this thing. And again, you don't have to necessarily post this anywhere. In fact, it's probably better if you don't.
It's actually better if you throw it away too. Like you could rip it up, tear it. And there's I would say I'm on the mild, non-toxic woo side of things. That there is if you are a spiritual person, like once you get a certain level of clarity, you can start asking yourself, not everybody else, why they should be the way they should be. Like you really do interact with the world differently. Like I wouldn't be able to engage with extremists who have their version of the world, some of them that don't want me in it.
Right.
Like if I didn't understand myself deeply, and I'm not encouraging you start interviewing extremists, please don't.
No.
But
no, it's a bad road. You end up down here. You end up doing podcasts and stuff. It's terrible.
I asked the chairman why he decided me, of all people, could still talk to him after he got out of prison or whatever. And
You're talking about Enrique Tarrio from the Proud Boys, right?
And he told me that, you could tell that you're a sincere person, you're authentic, And then other people have said, how did you get into these spaces? Like they know who you are. And I'm like, yeah, they know who you are, and I'm not leading with anything other than who I am. Also, do, as long as it doesn't involve killing people, do whatever you want to do. I'm not here to tell you how to be or how to act, but if you've joined an extremist group that is celebrating the death of Heather Heyer or celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, clearly several things have not gone right in your life.
Yeah. You're on the wrong path at that point, regardless of what side of the path you're walking on, that's not the right path. I mean, celebrating political violence in this country, and both of those incidents are examples of political violence, then, I mean, I'm not trying to both sides this. I'm simply saying that, like, this is not a road we want to go. We don't want to celebrate when our enemies get killed as a result of their political views, because this is not going anywhere good. It's going to end up with all of us eventually.
Yeah, and I can feel into the anger that this will probably evoke in a lot of people listening to this, of like, how can you, when the world is like this, tell me that I need to calm down, you invalidating piece of shit. Like, it's like, no. I'm telling you, if you had to plan or strategize anything in this state, you'd fuck it up.
Yeah.
Because you're in that state. Yeah. So let me Jewish mom you a little bit. Do you actually do what's fucking right for yourself, you dumb pieces of shit? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, true story. It's like, you get a lot more done when you're rational. You get a lot more done when you've thought through what you're trying to accomplish and you have a plan. And the whole aspect of social media is designed to stop you from doing any of that. You don't get a plan. You get bombarded over and over with one video or clip after another of something really horrible that hits you right where you live in terms of your values, your ideas, and you can make a plan how you want to react to that. Like, one of the things I think about is, I don't know how much you know about combat sports. I myself have done a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over the years. Never been much of a striker. I know a little boxing. I know that you should probably keep your hands up and your chin down. And I also know that one of the hardest things when people first start doing any kind of striking art is not reacting the way that you instinctively want to react when you get punched in the face. Humans have two ways of reacting to getting smacked in the face, historically. One is to cower, like, right, you're afraid, you don't want them to do it again. One is to get even madder, and you just get aggro with them about it. Neither of those are right. You want to be able to essentially make a rational plan for how you're going to deal with this, rather so much than letting the pain and the shock move you in one direction or another. You have to be the one that determines when you move. And the whole of social media is designed to make you react like you just got punched in the face. And people do that, which is understandable completely, but that's not necessarily the right way to handle that situation. You have to stop for a second and say, what am I trying to accomplish here? What do I want to accomplish with this? What do these people want to accomplish with me? Do I want to be part of this? Do I want to contribute my time and emotional energy to whatever this project is that this person who put this clip out here is trying to get out of me? And I think being able to have that presence of mind to take a step back and say, maybe I don't need to step up to this. Maybe I don't need to freak out the way these people would like me to freak out. And that doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you a smart person. That you've thought through the idea of, I'm not going to have my strings pulled as a result of whatever you're trying to get me to believe here. I'm not going to have you controlling me. I'm going to make up my own mind how I feel about this subject. And I'm going to start by taking a minute and processing it. Just slowing down, taking a step back. And we just don't do enough of that.
Yeah, when I have people that come to me and they're like, hey there, friendly reminder, I just want you to know, this person is just a very toxic individual and blah, 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 blah. I just block them instantly because I'm like, okay, you are definitely not coming from a good place. There is this concept of wanting to protect your community. And then there is a distortion of that to coerce and manipulate other people to engage in behavior that is aligned with your increasingly more narrow worldview. And I do feel like the coerciveness of many leftist organizing spaces has resulted in a lack of a coherent political ideology compared to Steve Bannon, who said what recently?
Yeah, Bannon has said a lot of really interesting things about this recently. And one of his was, the reason we're going to beat you is because we know what we're fighting for. You don't. We're not going to stop. We're more motivated than you are. and we believe in the cause. You're all really weak, and you're going to stop when we push you. We're not. And I don't like hearing that. And part of the reason I don't like hearing that is because I think he's kind of got a point. Bannon is somebody who historically has been able to push society's buttons at a very high level and get results that he's looking for. And the idea that these people have identified what they think is a weakness and they're going to just go at it until it really splits apart is not something I like hearing, but the answer isn't to yell at him at that point. The answer is to figure out how to build that resilience so that, okay, you say this is going to go on for a while, then it's going to go on for a while. You say this is a conversation we're going to be having for years, then this is a conversation we're going to be having for years. I don't like it any better than a lot of people do, but the idea of like either freaking out and giving them what they want or freaking out and making bad behavioral choices that give them what they want is something I like even less. So I'm going to try and think through what he's doing and what I can do to counter that in an intelligent manner. And I mean, we've talked about this, and we talked about this a little offline, that there are people out there that absolutely rely on putting horrible content and horrible ideas in front of you so that you will react and potentially share that content and say, look at this horrible shit these people are actually doing. Look at this gore video. Look at this graphic, awful thing. And the whole point of that is to get that one kid in a million that looks at it and says, yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. That's really transgressive. I want to be that guy. Where a million other people are going to look at that video and go, that is wrong and those people need to be in jail. They're doing it so the one kid sees it. And I think that, again, covering this stuff is really tricky because you want to make sure you're not helping them as much as you're potentially exposing whatever it is that they're doing. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily get the idea that they want the exposure. And it's emotional reactivity that these people are using to get that exposure. They put something in front of you that's so bad that you just have to say something about it. Humans can't process that on their own.
That smile character, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They need that response, and somebody's going to have to do something with that. There's just too much energy in it for any one person to be able to just stop and say, I'm going to internalize this and it's not going anywhere past me. That's not generally how it works.
Yeah, and there are mercenary figures out there who will say and do whatever they need to do to advance the causes that they're being paid to promote. Again, this is like a controversial thing that's happened recently, but it's not confined to any one political ideology.
No, it isn't.
And it's part of why things are so even worse, in addition to social media and the ways that the algorithms dictate what we see, who we interact with.
And like it or not, Charlie Kirk was one of those guys. I mean, Charlie Kirk was one of those guys. That's what he did. And, you know, we're all used to reacting very strongly to Charlie's content because that was what Charlie's content was supposed to do. It was supposed to make you react one way or the other. So at some point, you kind of have to say, do I really want to take the bait here? Do I really want to let this continue to lead me around? Personally, no, I don't.
And I understand things from a trauma-informed perspective and the cognitive distortions that trauma can create, you know, all or nothing, black and white thinking. I remember a lot of anti-fascists back in the day saying, like, this was how you fight fascism. Like, this is the one only way, by making people, you know, if you ever join a Nazi organization, you are forever a Nazi. It doesn't matter what you do when you start trying to rebuild your life outside of it, because I need to put you there because you are and will forever be bad. And if that person had done any self-reflection or anything, and with the understanding that these are not the people who do leave and are sincere, you know, which is something that's very hard to gauge. I can't say there's some unified metric, right? But we need to find a way to absorb members back into society and a shared understanding of reality. And it's an uphill battle. So when someone who genuinely atones for what they did takes a stand and does what they need to do for themselves, right?
Right.
that's a very powerful, motivating thing, right? If you're trying to shame a person for leaving a group that embraces hatred, you really have to think through the implications of doing that, because you're putting them in this bad category, right? And they try to leave that category, and it's almost like you need them there to define yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And having had lots of people on this podcast who have walked away from some level of extremism, and I've done my best to vet everybody we've had. There's been people we've had pitched to us and me, and that we haven't had on the show for one reason or another. And in at least a couple cases, it's because I didn't think you were serious. I can look at what you're out here doing and you're saying, oh, well, I feel this way now about it. And in some cases, your behavior didn't actually line up. And in some cases, I just didn't, feel it when I was looking at what you were doing. I was like, you probably need to be out of this for a little longer than you have been. You were involved in some really terrible stuff. And I'm not saying, obviously, that you can never, rejoin, polite society, but you really need to make sure that you've done the work. You need to make sure you've thought this all through. So when you deal with the idea of being a somewhat, public figure as a result of this, you've done your homework and you're not going to be attacked as much by both sides for being involved in this. You're not going to be hauled back into your old life or, dragged on the other side of social media. You really need to get used to the idea that maybe you're not going to be a public person anymore once you've been involved with this. Maybe you just have to stay back. Maybe that's not your role anymore as a human. But if it is, you really have to have done the work. And in some cases, I've reached out to vet people. I've reached out to, people who are involved in, extremism research, and in some cases, other extremists, saying, hey, this person's over here. What do you think? And sometimes you get answers you like, sometimes you don't, and you just have to make the best decision you can when it comes to platforming this. But I've always erred on the side of, if I can't be 100,000,000% sure that this isn't what you're doing, I don't want anything to do with promoting your content or you as an individual. I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong or lying to me, but if I can't really get that feeling of, yeah, this person means it, then, I don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah, and I've told every former extremist who has wanted to take that very public route when they left that you need to not, like, you need to take your time to process and reflect. And the last thing the world needs is severely traumatized people trying to grapple with their experiences being public figures. And that's why I hate TikTok so much.
I don't even have a TikTok account. I totally can't blame you. If you've ever seen a Did Nothing Wrong TikTok account, it's not me. It's not us. It has nothing to do with us. I don't like TikTok.
Yeah,
I just don't.
These platforms are designed to monetize our attention, right? So of course they're going to reinforce you utilizing the platform. And that has deluded some people who don't know fuck about shit to think that they have an audience. They're a celebrity. And they must appeal to their crowd. And it has resulted in the dumbest shit I've ever seen recently.
Oh yeah. It's stupid. And we're dealing with a point in society where people get their news from this app, from this platform. And this isn't good. This isn't good at all. This is the definition of how to be a reactive person is to get all your news from TikTok. That'll definitely get you up and hyped about whatever it is you're watching. And that's the whole point. None of these people want you to turn off the TV. None of these people.
Have you heard of the term cookers?
Cookers? No.
Yeah. So a bunch of very pasty white people that look kind of like me went out into the sun all day.
Oh,
predictably
that's a bad idea.
Got sunburned, and then instead of believing that the sun caused the sunburn, they convinced themselves that it was directed energy weapon. Like, do you want those people to have, obviously we live in, to our great misfortune, sometimes a free speech world where everyone really is allowed to say anything, and that's beautiful. And there's also people like this who you feel bad for as much as, wow, that's the conclusion you came to.
We didn't used to give people like that a platform. That's the difference. I mean, now it's like anybody can say something like that and then go completely viral and have millions of people see it within a short period of time. Where, like, at one point, it was very clear that if you went out in the sun all day and got sunburned, the reason that happened was because you went out in the sun all day with inadequate sun protection, right? Not because somebody had a directed fucking energy weapon. I mean, what the fuck? That's
remember when we
ranting on the street corner kind of shit.
In grocery stores where you would know the magazines that were like totally batshit because it's like, oh, Jesus got reincarnated as a crocodile, and here's a photo or something.
That shit's great, but I mean,
you're like, oh, that's completely batshit.
It's not real,
right?
It's not real.
And maybe you knew a person who read that stuff for fun or whatever, but now they're like fucking talk show hosts.
Oh yeah. I mean, you look at Alex Jones. I mean, when Alex Jones first got started, that was Alex Jones. He was taken about as seriously as the Weekly World News. He was that guy that like was on about aliens. And I mean, you go back and you look at all the History Channel shows from the 00s and the 010s, and it's like Alex Jones is the expert they're quoting in a lot of the like ancient alien shit. You watch that now and you're like, oh, whoa, that's bad. We were actually talking about it. And we were asking Alex Jones questions about this kind of shit. That's not good. But now it's like people started taking this seriously. People started looking at guys like him and saying, well, you know, maybe they got a point. These are voices that were silenced by the mainstream media. And I'm not trying to puff up the mainstream media here, but maybe there's a reason why guys like Alex Jones never got to go on it. Maybe there's a reason why they didn't put this dude on, because like he is full of shit and he's a wingnut. Why would we want to expose our people to that? You know, why does this guy need an audience?
It makes me think about how quickly the like quote unquote boomers got radicalized to different things. And I think it's because back in their day, news was news. Like you watched the news and there were
Walter Cronkite,
a ton of
Dan Rather.
Yeah. And so when all these stories started coming out, I feel like some people who were used to the news being, you know, fairly reliable and predictable are like, oh yeah, so like this is news. So I read this. This must be true. And then you get into all kinds of crazy territory because you don't realize the intention behind these sources trying to push you in a direction. Like the same thing that motivates me in my work facilitating disengagement with extremists, and the same thing that motivates me in my work building a more healthy, resilient community. I think that's why it's lasted this long. It's the ability to recognize when you are moved or being moved in a particular direction, and you're reading stuff that aligns with your core identity too, because that's the hardest type of disinformation to grapple with. The stuff that contains truthful elements that appeal to your core identity. We need something in the world, and I think it has to start with the level of individual thought.
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got about this stuff was be careful of anything that confirms every one of your priors. Some narrative that actually talks in a way that makes it sound like it's designed to appeal to you. The story's just too perfect. And we've all almost gotten nailed on this a few times. We've all almost believed things, and in some cases we have believed things that fit that definition, but have later turned out to be not true. And I think that's the kind of thing we have to watch out for more going forwards, is the idea that we have been so thoroughly micro-targeted that bad actors on all sides of the fence know how to create a narrative that appeals to our personal prejudices on this, to our personal ideas of this. And it's very hard to get people to stop believing something they feel like is true.
Yeah.
And it should be true because it lines up with everything you think. But in a lot of cases, no, that's just not it.
Yeah, and then it's the way people are primed too. A lot of the charismatic leaders will say like, well, they'll tell you blah, 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 but you'll be ready for them, right? And then someone's like, hey, I have this source that has these verified things that touches on this, and you might appreciate this perspective. The person's like, oh, they told me they would do this thing, and then,
Yeah, and there's people on both sides making a ton of money being that person, being like a very toxic person in the space. And in some cases, they make a lot of money in, GoFundMe or Patreon donations for this. And their whole goal is to get you reactive, get you just upset all the time, and that they're the ones that know the answers and that you should just rely on them for truth. And that's the part where it's just so dangerous, I think.
Yeah, and I go back to my Gramps. Like, he used to listen to both radio station, the conservative radio station, the more liberal-leaning radio station, because he wanted to get a sense of what the truth was, right? And if you're in an in-group with extreme rigid dynamics, the group is going to push people to extremes because everyone's going to go along with it, and no one will question the group. And when these dynamics are at play, anyone who questions becomes the outsider, and the fear of being ostracized for speaking the truth about things is very strong. So most people will continue to go along with the crowd, even if it's a disservice to them, their well-being, their actual values in the world. Like I am still, it's September 11th, and I'm still baffled in understanding how we got to this point where when September 11th happened, we knew who our enemies were as a country, right?
Yeah.
And now there are college students in fucking keffiyehs not just calling for a global intifada, but the destruction of the United States that allows them to speak so freely.
Yeah. I don't think some of these people realize quite what would happen at that point. I don't think some of these people quite realize what would happen if they got everything they want. And as somebody who feels like I do, I think I don't want them to get everything that they want, because if they did, it would be bad for pretty much everybody that, is out there to be able to have to live under that. It's just not something most people really, really have thought about all that hard, what life would actually be like in that particular circumstance. It's one thing to have sympathy with people who have historically been shit on quite hard by a government that's been pretty terrible to them on a number of occasions. Mm-hmm. It's another thing altogether to think, well, because of that, we should be willing to completely tear down America and let the extremists run things for a while. It's like, I don't get there.
Here's a thought. If before your TikTok video, you have to look up the country you're talking about on a map, you should probably just shut the fuck up.
And you remember a couple of years ago, there was that whole TikTok trend of like people talking about how Osama bin Laden did nothing wrong. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I found myself thinking, like, is this like a test?
Honestly?
Is this yeah, were they beta testing?
Honestly,
could you get people to believe in that?
I think some people would call it like a data void that was being exploited, but
Yeah, because like, man, regardless of what you think about America, regardless of what you think about Osama bin Laden, again, political violence is wrong, and flying airplanes full of people into skyscrapers, into the Pentagon, and into fields in Pennsylvania is wrong. Mm-hmm. This is bad regardless of who's doing it. This is absolutely something people should condemn. And all of a sudden they were able to use TikTok to get a bunch of people to say, well, he had a point. No, he didn't.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. He was a horrible human being, and the world, unfortunately, is better off that he is no longer here.
Yeah, and he had an ideology that was coherent.
Oh, very.
When you don't have a coherent ideology, guess what happens? The coherent ideologies swoop in because they know you're a fucking idiot.
And this is why a guy like Steve Bannon can get purchased, because he's got a coherent ideology. And a lot of people that want to argue with him don't. He knows how he wants things to look. And he is prepared to put a lot of time and effort, money, energy into making that happen. And if you don't have that sort of coherent ideology to know why you're doing what you're doing and what you should be doing, you're going to lose every single time. And we have to get better at that. We really do. The idea of being less reactive, being more proactive in terms of how we approach social media, being more discerning about the content that we take in, and spending less time doing this and more time outside, or doing something that is the whole reason why we bother with any of this stuff in the first place, right? I mean, if you didn't have something that you were looking forward to after this was over, you wouldn't keep doing it. You know, we all have a way that we want the world to look at some point. And I think that's part of the reason why we keep doing what we do. People like you, people like me, people like, you know, the other contemporaries in this space. It's not because the money's so great, because it isn't. It's not because the prestige is there, because it also really isn't. It's more about, I see something that I want to happen. And the only way this probably happens is if I go out and do something about it. Because right now in this space, you know, there's people, but there could always be more. And you want to make sure that you've done everything you can to bring that world, you know, into being. And that's what guys like Bannon do. You know, they spend all this time trying to figure out how to bring that world into being that they want. And when you're focused and when you have an ideology that makes sense to them, that's coherent, that's a dangerous combination for everyone else.
Yeah. And I guess when you said, you know, the war leading to peace, I want to invert that a little bit. And I have learned a lot about the ideal of peace, the concept of like tikkun olam, or making the world a better place. And I guess the most heartbreaking thing is seeing how that notion of peace has been co-opted by some of the worst bad faith actors out there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, if you are a peace advocate who's interested in nuclear non-proliferation, but American nuclear non-proliferation, are you really like pro-peace? Or are you like, yeah, get them with their own logic, idiots?
Yeah. Seriously, it's very much a, like, have you really thought this through, what happens if we end up doing this the way that you're talking about doing it? You know, have we really thought through that? I really, I don't know. It's an interesting place that we're at this point. And honestly, I'm glad you are doing what you do, that there are people like you doing what you do, and giving people a chance to step back and stop and say, hey, wait a second, is this really where we want to go with all of this? Because the world is crazy and fast and scary, and there's a lot going on. And we really do need to take a step back from that and say, hey, wait a minute, is this really how we should be doing things? And I think, honestly, you've been very helpful about that. That's one of the things you've always said is, hey, let's think this through. Let's stop for a second and think about where this is all going. So I really appreciate the fact that, you know, you do that and that you exist as a result, you know, seriously.
And I appreciate that you're open to having these discussions and continuing to create dialogue in a moment that it's so severely needed.
Well, it's all we can do, right? I mean, is just, we keep talking, because there are people who would like us to all go pick up guns now. There are people who would like us to, you know, go have that civil war. And I'm hoping we don't end up doing that. I'm really hoping, because this is not a fight anyone can win. This is not something that's going to make anything we're doing any easier or better. I mean, the analogy is not the Civil War in America, I think. The analogy is the Troubles. The analogy is Northern Ireland. The idea that we're going to have just generations full of people who are mad at each other and hate each other. And I think this is just not going to lead us anywhere good. And again, none of these places that have had this civil conflict in the past, be it Northern Ireland, be it Italy in the years of lead, none of these people have had the level of guns out in society that we do right now. So something that might just result in, you know, a few thousand people killed and a whole lot of bad feelings and hatred between various factions going forward in America could result in something a whole lot worse because of that factor alone, if nothing else. So we need to turn it down. We need to turn the volume down. We need to turn the rhetoric down. And we need to be very clear on all sides of it that assassinating your political opponents doesn't lead anywhere you want to go. It just doesn't. And if that's something I'm going to get canceled for saying, then, then I get canceled for saying it.
Hey, it's like people saying, judge you by the enemies you've made.
Yeah. And, I'm pretty fine with the enemies I've made so far. I mean, I've made some enemies and I'm pretty good with it. What's up, Vishvara? How you doing? But, I'm really not too bummed that some of the people who don't like me don't like me. It's just, you're gonna run into that.
But I'd also, on the Ben Shapiro front, I've seen some horrific calls to make him the next person.
Yeah.
And
it's like, no,
it's never okay. It's never okay.
I don't want Ben Shapiro dead. I would rather he wasn't on TV. I would rather he wasn't, as popular as he is, as prominent as he is. I would rather there weren't so many people like listening to his show and going, that guy talks sense. I would like that not to be a thing, but I don't want to get there by having him end up getting assassinated. No, that never really stops anybody. That never really stops anybody from, the people who are in charge of all of this would love to have more martyrs. They absolutely would. And they're making a martyr out of Charlie Kirk right now. So I think one ought to think real hard about giving them any more. Because when you have basically people who you're portraying as martyrs, that in itself takes rational thought out of the equation when it comes to how you handle it. And yeah, I don't call for Ben Shapiro's death. Don't call for anybody's death. Just don't do it. This is not how this is supposed to go. This is not how we're going to get a more just and fair and decent society that works for everybody who lives in it by killing pundits, killing podcasters, essentially. This is not, what are we doing? How do we think this is going to help?
Yeah. We're not
That's
thinking.
The part that blows my mind.
We're not thinking.
No, we're not.
We're reacting.
We're not. And we need to be less reactive at the end of the day. We need to be less reactive and more thoughtful. And that's the one takeaway I think I would like everyone to have from this incident is a renewed idea of we need to think harder about what we do as a society and as individuals. And we need to think about what the consequences of letting this kind of violence happen all the time will end up looking like. Because, it's going to be somebody else after Charlie Kirk. And it's going to be an eye for an eye for an eye until none of us can see anything in the world. And if that's the world you want to live in, great, but it's not me. That's, I think we should be past that by now as a society, but here we are. Sam, thank you so much for coming on. I know this is a bit weird because of, events coming up and circumstances coming up that caused things to be a little intense today, but I really appreciate the fact that you're out there doing what you do and that I get a chance to talk to you about where all this is going. Like, as somebody who's involved in this kind of work, it makes me feel a whole lot less crazy when I can talk to people like you and say, no, it's not just me. It's everybody. We're all kind of in the same boat here. So thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, likewise.
Have a great rest of your day and, get outside, try to touch some grass, try to stay sane, okay?
Will do. You too.
Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can find us on the web at didnothingwrongpod.com. Please make sure you subscribe to get our content straight into your inbox. You can also follow us on Twitter at GrizaBJJ, GRZABJJ, as well as DNWPod. We're extremely grateful for paid subscriptions and donations that allow us to keep doing this important work. Thanks, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.